Steve Rogers may be one of a kind, but that hasn't stopped people from trying to imitate him, including John Walker. It's easy to see why people assume he's going to be the villain in the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. He's clearly copying Cap's look, and in the comics they definitely don't see eye to eye. But with Helmut Zemo running around, is he really the villain we should be worried about? There's a chance that not only will he not be a villain, but he might just end up being a hero.
How many of you are ready to help me sock old Adolf on the job? Okay.
John Walker grew up wanting to become a hero, and not just because he had a great name for it. He idolized his older brother who lost his life during the Vietnam War and decided to enlist himself. To give himself an edge, he took part in the incredibly risky Power Broker program, which used potentially dangerous substances to boost the stats of participants. Once he was significantly stronger than the average person, he became a hero known as the Super Patriot, or kind of a great value brand Captain America. He claimed to stand for the true ideals of the nation, and this former wrestler was a real heel towards our beloved Captain America. In the comics, he's usually the antagonist, but will that also be the case in the Falcon and the Winter Soldier? At the end of Avengers Endgame, we saw Steve Rogers pass on the title of Captain America to Sam Wilson. While that's all well and good, let's not forget that the government was behind creating Captain America in the first place. So naming a successor without their approval and filling out tons of paperwork probably isn't going to sit well with them. It's no secret that Steve didn't always play by the rules. In Civil War, he openly defied the government and then went rogue. The only reason they weren't knocking on the door of his support group in Endgame with an arrest warrant was undoubtedly the whole decimation thing. This time around, they're going to want a hero they can control, and we know that's not Sam Wilson. Instead, their successor will be John Walker, also known as U.S. Agent. Naturally, this will pit him against Sam Wilson and Bucky Barnes, but does that really make him a villain? It's easy to focus on the differences between Steve Rogers and John Walker, but let's talk about what they have in common. They're both dedicated to their countries, they both realize that they have important roles as icons, and they're both dedicated to fighting for what's right. Of course, what's right can be subjective, hence their major difference. But one of the reasons we all love Marvel characters is that they're rarely just strictly good or strictly bad. Let's take a look back at Civil War. Most people would again agree that Tony Stark and Steve Rogers are both heroes. In fact, they're two of the most popular heroes in the MCU, and yet they were on totally opposite sides regarding the Sokovia Accords. Having different ideologies simply isn't enough to make U.S. Agent an outright villain. But don't get me wrong, I'm not predicting he's going to be BFFs with Sam or Bucky or anything. In fact, he's going to likely rub a lot of people the wrong way if he's anything like his comic book counterpart. In Civil War, we saw Steve defect from the government, and that's something he's done multiple times in the comic books. He's often torn between deciding whether he should support the American government as it exists, or the ideologies it's supposed to represent. But U.S. Agent, on the other hand, is a lot more eager to support the government, which is why they considered him a good option. He talks a big game and can be a downright jerk, but he's undeniably good at punching bad guys, and that's an essential superhero skill. So as far as the government is concerned, Steve's ideologies make him a liability. They want someone who's going to follow their orders and be able to punch people right in the face. Sam had plenty of enemies to fight during his time as the Falcon, and he's only going to be having more piling on now that he's Captain America. After Civil War, he's definitely not the government's favorite person, even if he did help defeat Thanos and his army during Endgame. That battle definitely helped demonstrate that the world needs heroes now more than ever. But I can't imagine the government's desire to control them will have lessened, and as far as I know, the Sokovia Accords are still active. If Sam isn't a government-sanctioned hero, then technically what he's doing is illegal. Which means that if you look at it this way, he's the villain, while U.S. Agent is the officially sanctioned hero of the show. But of course, most of us fans aren't going to let a little thing like anti-vigilante laws tell us who to consider a hero or a villain, especially when there are true evildoers on the loose. Sam and U.S. Agent will clearly have some ideological differences, but when I think of a true antagonist, I picture someone like Helmut Zemo. He's one of the most successful villains in the history of the MCU, so he's a much bigger threat than someone like U.S. Agent tries to do the right thing, even if he's less than likable a lot of the time. We all know that Zemo is back for the Falcon and Winter Soldier because not only did he successfully fracture the Avengers, but he managed to survive doing so. It's possible that we'll get to see him fulfill the role of another master manipulator from the comic books, the Red Skull. As far as we know, the Red Skull is still floating around on Vormir. Yeah, he doesn't have to guard the Soul Stone anymore since it's been destroyed, but how's he gonna get home? Somehow I don't think it's gonna be very easy as calling an Uber. Since he's out of the picture and the show will be introducing US Agent to the MCU, Zemo could step into this role and help pit Sam and John against each other. In the comics, the Red Skull uses a cloned version of Steve Rogers to infiltrate the government and immediately starts mucking things up. He helps US Agent get chosen as the next Captain America and orchestrates the demise of his parents. Once his secret identity is no longer a secret, an extremist group called the Watchdogs eliminates his parents, and in retaliation, US Agent destroys most of the Watchdogs. Needless to say, this was a lot to handle, and the Red Skull succeeded in pretty much destroying his opponent emotionally. Punching people in the face is great and all, but a true villain knows how to punch people right in the feels. Zemo could probably accomplish something similar without having the benefit of a Steve Rogers clone. Then it will be a simple matter of convincing the US Agent that it really was Sam and Bucky who mastermind the whole thing. The scenario is totally keeping in with the abilities we've seen him demonstrate so far, and would pit these heroes against one another. We've also seen some pretty compelling set photos behind the scenes of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. It looks as though Bucky and Sharon Carter will encounter Zemo at some point or another. They're dressed in casual clothing, so it's possible that instead of fighting with their fists, something more subtle and insidious is going on here. Since we've also seen Zemo with his iconic purple mask from the comic books, it certainly seems as though he's going to be a major antagonist of the show. As further evidence of this theory, we have the Disney Plus spot that aired during the Super Bowl. We saw someone wearing a costume that's incredibly similar to Captain America's, and it's definitely not Sam Wilson. If John Walker becomes the new Captain America, then it's possible Zemo is behind this appointment. We've also seen some set photos of actor Wyatt Russell filming the show. It appears as though the military part of his backstory will be incorporated, and we get a better look at him in his Captain America costume. Zemo has his mask, and US Agent has his Cap costume, so it certainly seems like everyone's suiting up for trouble. Zemo knows all too well what heroes can accomplish when they work together, and after the events of Endgame, so does pretty much everyone else. If he's working on some sort of grand evil scheme, it makes sense that he'd want to cause some sort of diversion. Manipulating heroes into fighting each other instead of him would be a huge advantage. It's similar to what he did during Civil War, but the details are different enough to be interesting. There's no doubt that Helmut Zemo is a villain. In the comic books, he's an adherent enemy of Captain America, and in the MCU, his hatred of heroes isn't exactly subtle. But there's likely another force which could be an asset to Zemo and a danger to everyone else. Yes, I'm talking about the fictional MCU government. In the world of comic books, the government ranges from simply ineffectual to outright corrupt. Even though Zemo is the big baddie of Civil War, the government definitely helped add fuel to the fire that ended up burning all the Avengers. If Zemo infiltrates the government, he could easily convince them to choose John Walker as their official hero. He takes orders, he doesn't spend too much time pondering what's right and what's wrong, so in many ways, he's a great candidate. Someone like Sam Wilson already knows Zemo isn't going to be trusted, and he's seen this kind of large-scale corruption before. He's also shown that he's not afraid to directly defy government orders, which is another reason why he looks less than an ideal candidate. In the MCU, we've seen Hydra agents infiltrate the government as well as S.H.I.E.L.D. These aren't easy tasks, but insidious agents have been successful in the past. After the blip, it's safe to assume that things in the government are especially hectic, and there's probably a lot going on. All of this chaos would be the perfect time for someone like Zemo to strike, and it's possible that he could get US Agent on his side without him realizing that he's working for an actual villain and not just fulfilling his civic duty. Even though he usually follows orders, that's not always the case. If he realizes that he's being manipulated, then there's a chance he could actually team up with Sam and Bucky and help him out. He was sent on a mission to strip Sam of his shield in the comics. The government decided that he was no longer worthy of the coveted Captain America title and wanted John to reclaim the shield. But even though John wasn't Sam's biggest fan, he actually refused to take the shield away from him, at least at first. When Steve Rogers got involved, things got a little more complicated. You see, Steve stepped in for a one-on-one talk with John and told him that Sam was too far out of control and it would really be for the best if John confronted him. If you're thinking that doesn't sound like the Steve Rogers I know and love, well, you're right. Because it turns out that this was really the Hydra version of Steve Rogers everyone hated. But his ploy worked and resulted in a heated battle between Sam and John. I'm pretty sure the Hail Hydra Easter egg from Avengers Endgame is the most we're going to get in that particular Captain America storyline in the MCU, but the idea of an outside force manipulating Sam and John into fighting one another seems like a natural plot progression. At this point, we all know a great villain can divide our heroes, but we also know that there's nothing like a super powerful villain to bring people together. After all, Thanos' sending Loki to get the Space Stone brought the Avengers together in the first place, and when the Mad Titan collected the Infinity Stones, it inspired our heroes to band together once again. Helmut Zemo might be the one behind the animosity between Steve, Bucky, and John, but his plan could advertently bring them all together in the end.
You ready to follow Captain America into the jaws of death?
Hell no.
I'm a fan of complex characters, so I'm definitely interested in seeing a nuanced, not strictly villainous US agent. Are you hoping he's a friend, or would you rather see him as a foe? Let us know what you think in the comment section below, and don't forget to click on the subscribe button for more new videos from us here at CBR. Bye for now.